Good evening, thank you for being here. My name is Catherine Caesar. I'm the Executive Director of Arts Center Sarasota, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Juan here tonight with us. We have so enjoyed his work, and so many of us are curious about the process and more about his experience with this show. So please silence your cell phones and enjoy our artist talk.
So for those of you who don't know Juan, I'd love to just start with a little brief bio introduction. So you were born in Cuba, and you came to the U.S. pretty young as a kid. Can you share with us just a little bit about that early journey?
Sure. I was 8 years old when my father took me aside and said, there's an opportunity for you to leave the country. Your uncle and his wife are leaving, and anybody who lives in the same house can go. And he was not able to come because my two sisters, one of them was married, the other one was engaged, and both of their men were under what's called military age, so there was an age range where they were not allowed to leave the country. So he didn't want to leave my sisters behind, and there was also my elderly grandmother. So he says, I think you should go, but it's up to you. So about a year later, when about a month before I turned 10, is when I got to come to the U.S., landing in Miami.
That's a pretty big decision to make for a 10-year-old.
It is, but okay, so here, it was a difficult decision, but I think when you're 9 or 10, you don't necessarily think of all the consequences. I think I had a really good relationship with my father, so if he thought that I should leave, I thought, well, I probably should. It didn't occur to me that I would never see him or a lot of the rest of my family again. And also at that age, you kind of like adventure. You think of something new, something exciting that you're going to do, and so it was difficult. But at the same time, I didn't think of all the negative consequences that it would have. And
so how long did it take for you to get from Miami to Seattle, where you spent quite a few years?
Okay, so I lived in Miami from 1966 to 79. Then I had to back up and tell you that at that time, I was singing for a living. And so Miami was a sleepy little town back then. There was not the Miami that you know now. It was not a whole lot going on. So I wanted to be in a bigger city. And I decided to go, I took a trip to New York City, I took a trip to LA, and while I was in LA, I rented a car and drove up to San Francisco for one day. And I decided that's where I want to be. So I went back to...
Most people do that.
Yeah. Went back to Miami. So I moved to San Francisco in 1979, and I left in 81. I thought I was going on a long vacation to Key West. Ended up staying there for 9 months. And then I arrived in Seattle in 82. So I lived in Seattle for 40 years, and moved here 3 years ago to St. Pete.
It's an adventurous journey.
Yes, I've traveled back and forth.
So you were singing. How long have you been dedicating yourself to visual arts?
So it actually started when I sold my first painting in San Francisco. I had 2 paintings that goes for this little hotel motel that a friend of mine managed, and he said, I really want some artwork for the walls in these hallways, so I hear you like making art. I said, sure, I'll paint something. So ended up painting 2 paintings. I don't know whatever happened to them. I don't know if they're still there. I don't even know if the motel is still there. But it didn't really happen seriously until I moved to Seattle. And the way that, so you have to understand that I didn't go to school for art. I'm self-taught. I didn't plan to make art as a career or for a living. I didn't grow up with that possibility in mind. You know, my family didn't encourage making art. It was like, that's just something you do as a hobby, but, you know, that's not a career. You know, you have to work for the wrought iron shop that, you know, your family runs. So it wasn't for me, but I always liked making art. So when I moved to Seattle, got this great apartment in this great neighborhood for practically nothing. And I thought I was really excited about living in this new city. And I wanted to be surrounded by art, but I couldn't really afford original art. And I really didn't want to go to some place and get a bunch of cheap posters. So I thought, well, I'd rather have some maybe not so great art that I make. And I got a job at a frame shop. And so I was taking the work that I was making to the frame shop and framing it because I got a discount. The owner of the frame shop said, why don't you just hang some of that stuff here? Like, okay, you know, honestly, it was not, I had no intention of doing anything with art as far as, you know, making a living. So he had, you know, his shop was very well attended, and he had some really good clients, really good interior designers, galleries that would bring artwork to be framed there. So slowly, these people started noticing what I was making, and that's basically how it started. I had the first time I showed in a gallery itself was a gallery that was about 3 blocks from the frame shop. They came to have something else framed, and they ended up walking back to the gallery with a couple of my pictures. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
As you see, things happen to me like that. That's how I ended up here.
A little bit.
A little bit. It was. I didn't write to Christina saying I want to have a solo show. I entered a competition that was juried by someone else, and I got rejected. But
And I was like,
so I'm glad that you were in the room viewing the work.
Absolutely. So, as a self-taught artist, who taught you? Was it your frame shop, you know, employer, books, museums?
Experimentation. I mean, I was making art since I was a kid, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just making stuff that pleased me. You know, I wasn't trying to do things for other people, but drawing, I had like sketchbooks and drawings and paintings and all kinds of things as I was growing up. And in high school, I would then give some artworks to friends, and then I started kind of just looking at other people's work and looking through books and going to galleries and going to museums. And I was, you know, one of those people that goes to a museum or a gallery and like looks too close where the alarms go on. And so, you know, I just kind of, you know, like, how did they do that? You know? And so, in asking questions, I asked people that I respected, that I looked up to, and, you know, like, can you tell me, like, how you do this? And some people were gracious enough to tell me, and some people would tell me, like, no. You figure it out. But yeah, it was about, it wasn't so much getting any kind of lesson from like a book that says how to, but it was just really more about examining the actual artworks and trying to come up with a way that I could do something that was similar to that, or that was reminiscent of whatever it was that I was seeing that I was liking.
That's amazing. So that's actually a great segue to my next question, which is about your process. A lot of the visitors come in and are like, what is that made of? So I know it's very labor intensive, but maybe you could explain how you get these amazing services.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Speaking of when people come and see my work, I've had several people ask if it was glass. I had one woman come to my studio and argue with me that it was glass. I'm like, okay, it's glass. You got it. If you want it to be glass, that's great. No, so I've been working with molding paste. I was looking it up to see like how far, because people are like, oh, this is new. It's like, no, actually, I've been doing it since 1998. And then one thing about me is like I work on a series, and then maybe I kind of back off it a little bit just to kind of feel refreshed when I come back to it. But yeah, in 1998, I was already using molding paste in a different way. I was doing more, like this area, it would have been more texture, and I was just using little palette knives to kind of create a little bit more texture. The way that these are done, they start out, the design starts out on a piece of corrugated cardboard. So let's say I cut like these two pieces of 36 by 36 cardboard, and I draw the design. And then I'm gonna stand up and that. So I cut everything out. So where this area is right here, this would be a piece of cardboard that was taped to the wood panel, as well as this and this. You know, all like the light area would be pieces of cardboard. So once all the cardboard is taped to the wood, I take the molding paste and I spread it all over, and then I remove the cardboard. So that's what creates the 3D areas. Once that's done, and I just saw the wood panel first. But once the molding paste dries, then I start doing like a very bright color for the base. And sometimes, in some works it shows up more than others, but sometimes you see like whatever color was all the way down to the bottom. The way the color is added is a lot of, this probably, I would say average about 20 layers of translucent color. I don't like anything that looks too opaque, because I think that the more translucency, the more you feel like you can go in and there's more depth in the color. The other thing that some of you might have noticed is like some of these like bluish or teal streaks. That is not blue paint, that's actually bronze. And what happens is that the patina of the bronze leaves those blue marks behind. One of my favorite things is when they puddle like on these little edges, and then you see this, when I make these pieces, I like to look, step back and look at the whole thing, but I really, really love looking at the little tiny details. To me, that's like really exciting. I know it's very nerdy, but yeah, that's how they get done.
I have a question about the backgrounds. In terms of translucency in your acrylics, how do you achieve that?
Fortunately, acrylics can be watered down quite a bit.
Okay.
I use they changed the name of it. It's a wetting agent. So I use a wetting agent plus water. And you get to the point where and sometimes if you were in my studio when I was working, you would go like, that didn't do it. But to me it did. And it just made a little tiny bit of a change that people would not notice.
Because it's a very watercolor effect and process of layering more and more translucency or darker colors to achieve this layered look. Anyway, that impressed me.
And I don't know if you were in my studio when I had probably one of my Dexter walls.
Yes.
I put, I stapled plastic onto the wall, and then I put the panels on there, and then the plastic goes out to about, 4 feet, because there's a lot of stuff that just strips down, and I'm trying to not get into too much trouble with my landlord, so. Plus, it's just harder to clean, but.
So you have 20 layers maybe plus of paint, plus the molding paste, plus the cardboard cutouts. I mean, how long would a piece like this take you?
I don't know. So let's say, I don't work I don't make one work at a time. I usually, I'll do all the cardboard drawings, and then I do all the cutting, and do all the taping to the panel. Then I do the molding paste, then I do the color, so it's, that's just a difficult question to answer. So it's for a long time, if you're looking at the progress, it doesn't look like I'm getting very far. And then all of a sudden, once the color starts coming in, it's oh, you did that fast. It's well, that was, that's been coming, but.
Are you able to reuse your cardboard cutouts?
Oh, that's a great question, because I always thought that I should, and I tried, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to take these pieces of cardboard that I haven't used, and I'm going to glue it to this other piece of cardboard, and I'm going to make these paintings that are going to be a lot less expensive, because it's I'm not paying for all these materials. They were so hard to do that I thought, yeah, this is it. I did two. I have two in my studio right now that I did using that pattern and I forget which, and that one. It was way more work than it was worth. It's just
Not sustainable.
no. And plus then people go, oh, it's just cardboard. It's oh my God, I was just trying to yeah.
Could you talk a little more about the use of bronze with greens? I mean, I don't know.
So what it is a fluid acrylic paint that has, bronze. And so it does react to the little particles.
So is that oxidized?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it is paint.
So obviously all these works have a really rich tactile quality. And so what do you think the texture brings about in your storytelling?
So one of the reasons I went back to using the molding paste, I was doing some paintings that were on clayboard. I don't know if you've ever used clayboard, which is wonderful, but one of the lovely things about it is it's the smoothest surface I've ever worked on, and that was very appealing. But again, I felt that I had worked that medium to death, and I didn't want to. Every time I make something, I want to feel excited about it, and so I feel that I get to a point when I'm working on a series of works that, okay, I can't make this exciting anymore. So I have to take some ideas from what I'm making and kind of take, turn the volume up in some way, or change the channel. I don't know, however you want to think of it. And so I was making work that was calling for texture. It was calling to stand out. And this whole strata series started out, with pretty much just lines going across and really referring to the Earth's strata and the many layers, that build up the Earth. And that's what, and I started thinking that it would be great to have texture to go along with the concept. So that's kind of how I got back into using the molding paste without making it like super textured. So.
It's great. I mean, when we first finally got all the work installed, I think I texted you and said, like, it's a little oasis in here. The atmosphere is just so beautiful and serene. Can you tell us a little bit about your color choices and what you're sort of hoping we feel from those colors?
Okay, so this is going to be difficult because a lot of the times I don't know what color anything's going to be. And I start out with some hot pink or like really bright blue or yellow, and then the first thing I do is wash it all down. I do a white wash of everything. And so you can start to see whatever color's in the bag, excuse me. But then it kind of starts becoming another canvas with a little bit of color. And then I start adding, the first thing I do is I can figure out, okay, what is the background going to be? So I'll do the background first. However, there's been many times where I thought, okay, this thing is going to be pretty much, very subdued. It's going to be, or it's going to be black and white or whatever. And then as I start adding the color, it kind of has a mind of its own, and it's like I feel like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And as I'm making it, as I'm adding color, I'm not crazy. It's not talking to me, but it does feel like whatever it is that I'm working on is dictating what I'm going to do. And it's very intuitive. It's less planned than it is intuitive. So it just feels like it should have a pop of color here or a pop of color there. And to me, it's all about, again, never studied color theory or anything like that. It's just what appeals to me, like what feels right as I'm making the work. There's been times where I'm like, oh, this is gonna be this, it's like, and like, no, I'm working on it, and the piece is just asking for something different.
It's great. I love it. So you mentioned briefly that the work is inspired by the formations of the Earth and sort of geological formations. Was there a trip you took or something that sort of sparked this interest in geological structure?
I remember, I was just thinking about this the other day, that even when I was a kid, so my family had a house that was close to the beach. You could see the beach from the house. And there was a very large backyard, and backyard with all kinds of fruit trees and all kinds of critters. I mean, this is Cuba. There's a lot of bugs and a lot of things. So my favorite thing would be to go back there and just dig through stuff and find little pods and bugs, and to me that was fun. When all the other kids were like, oh, let's go play baseball, it's like, no, let me go to the backyard and then dig up some holes and yeah, so to me that's always been interesting. And then I get really interested. I wanted to be an architect when I was a kid, and I realize now that a lot of architects really want to be artists, so I feel like I skipped over that part. But I started thinking about, not just what happens on the facade of a building, or how do you design a building, but what happens before you even get to that. What are you doing? You are disrupting the earth to create this, house or building or some sort of structure. And how does it fit? How does it go into the earth with as little disruption as possible, and without, I've always liked the idea of architecture that blends into its surroundings, or architecture that fits a certain place. I don't know, if you go to different cities or different parts of the world, you'll see, obviously there's going to be very different types of architecture. And you go, okay, that building fits there so well. And so that actually got me thinking about what goes on underneath the earth and what has happened over the many, many millions of years to get to the point where we're now building stuff on top of it. And so it's kind of like an iceberg. You see what's at the top, but there's so much more that goes into it that we don't think about. We don't really, it's not something that comes up in conversation. So I'm one of those people. I think about things that, it's like, what are you thinking about that? I have someone here who can tell you that I walk around taking pictures of the weirdest things. Like, where are you taking a picture of that? It's like, that's really exciting. There's this streak on the wall, or this, something that feels really organic and really like it happened there for a reason. It happened there very naturally. That nobody put it there, nobody designed it. It was just there.
And the work also deals a lot with the human condition and sort of our own structures and how we're living.
Yeah.
How does that come across as an abstract artist with these works?
Well, see, I appreciate all sorts of artists and all sorts of art. I have a very wide collection of my own at home. I don't have any of my artwork at home. I have everybody else's artwork at home because I get to see my work when I go to the studio anyway. So, I don't like making realistic work. I feel like for me, using my imagination is what makes me an artist. It's not so much whether I've learned or been taught something or how I learned it or how I got to that point. But I feel like I need to take something that's very real and very tangible and just make it very abstract. And it doesn't really matter to me what people see in the work. I prefer that people feel something when they look at the work. And I love when people are like, oh, that reminds me of this and this and that. And it's like, okay, great. That's fantastic. That's fun. That's when I feel like you have a dialogue with the art. So you're coming in with your baggage and you're interacting with the art, and it's providing you with some sort of conversation with whatever it is that you're looking at. So I feel like I think one of the things that to me probably shows up the most is balance in the work. I mean, it's when it comes to like human emotions and what I feel is some sort of like holistic feelings. Like I feel like I want my life to be as balanced as possible. So I put that out there, and whenever I'm making any of these really, and I used to do a lot of stuff that was very symmetrical, and I thought and I love symmetry, but I also feel like I can make something that's very, very well balanced without it being symmetrical. So that's a challenge that I love. One of the pieces that took me the longest as far as creating the design was that piece that's on canvas, because sure it's larger, but I started out in one corner, and then I had to make sure that every other shape was balanced with the one corner where I started. Because I feel like to me, that's what makes my life interesting, is having a balance of, work and home and, frivolity and seriousness and all those very, Zen feels that, I don't know if that answered the question.
When you have that, so for instance, that piece, did it start out as 2 pieces?
Yes,
Or
I knew it was gonna be 2 pieces.
and this started out as that many
Yeah,
panels?
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I wanted them to be connected,
Mhm.
and that was another thing that to me is important, is for things to be connected. Yeah, I love the idea of, you know, I mean, you could take one of these, you know, these panels and see it on its own if you didn't know that it was part of 9 pieces. But I love the idea that one goes into the other, goes into the other. They're all dependent on each other. And I think that that works physically and also in the way that I like to think about things.
So this might be my own personal baggage, like you mentioned, but I feel like the work is extremely gestural and has a subtle reference to the figure.
Yes. Okay, so the other thing that I actually added a little ingredient when I started making the work for this show. My favorite artist ever is Wilfredo Lamb. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was Cuban-born of African mother and Chinese father. And he was a contemporary of Picasso. He became well known in Paris when he was hanging out with those guys. Interestingly enough, I'm just going to give him credit for this. He introduced Picasso to the African masks. So don't quote me on that, but if you read enough about him, you will get the same feeling that Picasso didn't come up with the African motifs. It was Wilfredo Lamb that kind of brought that into his realm. And I have like a pretty large collection of African masks and sculptures. That plays a part of in this body of work. And a lot of them, I feel like they are figures. They're not realistic figures and they're not traditional, but there's certain elements about a lot of these images that I feel like, yeah. I mean, one of my studio neighbors said that they were like dancing Aztecs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, that's like, okay, again, like, sure.
No, I mean, they definitely have like a warrior sort of sense. We had a few people in here earlier that were wondering if you had any sort of tribal influence.
Well, yeah, several, I mean, a lot of tribal influences. Having been born in Cuba, there's a lot of African influence in pretty much everything, in any type of artistic endeavor. To me, there's no actual Cuban culture without African culture. It just wouldn't exist the way that we know it now. And whether it's music, art, I feel that you can't avoid it. And one of my favorite things to do my favorite time of year when I was a kid in Cuba was Carnival, which is, very much about tribal and costumes and, rituals and all that. So, those influences are there. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did in my effort to pay tribute to Wilfredo Lamb is the points in my work for this show are a little pointier. And I looked at some of his, I wanted to look at his work, and I have 4 or 5 books of his work. And I wanted to create something that was very much my work, but that paid homage to him. Because, it's like he has inspired me so much that it was a way of saying, you know, this is one of the ways that I learned. And, you know, I really was fascinated by his design sense, by his compositions and the balance in his own work. So yeah, all those influences are there.
So obviously you're extremely prolific. You made all this work pretty recently, but you also have a really extensive history of public art. How did that come about? I mean, how did you even get into public art?
Challenge, it was a challenge. No, it was, I thought wouldn't it be great to kind of, for like a better statement, like to leave your mark, you know, the place where you live. And so I thought, you know, when I make art at the studio, I know that it'll eventually end up in a building or in someone's house or something like that, where it will be treasured, hopefully, by the person that bought it. But there was something very special about creating something that anybody could see at any time without paying anything. I mean, obviously we pay it because tax dollars pay for public art, but it is for everyone to enjoy, like regardless of whether you are rich or poor and whatever your background is, you can have access to it and you can look at it anytime. So I liked that, and I thought, I have to figure out a way that I can do that. And so the first couple of times that I entered a public art competition were to create paintings for youth. And then so I just felt like, okay, because, you know, you start out baby steps, do what you know, and then I started trying to figure out how I could translate the work that I was making into materials that were durable and, you know, that can be outdoors. So it didn't take me long to realize that, oh, well, I come from a family of iron workers and metal workers. And I worked at my uncle's wrought iron shop for many years. So the idea of translating some of the work to steel became, you know, very appealing to me, because I thought it seemed true. It seemed true to myself, to who I am, and like where I came from and all that. So it was like baby steps, you know. It's just like, okay, so I'm going to do some flat steel cutout pieces, and, you know, do some windows and do some gates. And then I thought, well, I could make this like really 3D, you know. And I made a couple of pieces that were quite large. Like I did a sculpture that was like about 12 feet tall. And that was kind of fun to see something that, you know, you think about making, but you didn't think you could. But, you know, it was just, I like the idea of balancing that, making my work at home, you know, at the studio by myself, and then making stuff that's really put out there for the public.
So obviously with any sort of public art, you have to apply, there's editing, you have to sort of follow all those regulations. How did you manage to keep your artistic voice with so many other, you know, fingers in the cookie jar?
I have kind of stuck to my guns, and first of all, I won't apply to something that I'm not interested in. I almost walked away from a couple of projects because they wanted me, like, just to give you a quick example, I was supposed to do these sculptures for this high school, and it's called Chief Sealth High School. Chief Sealth that's who Seattle was named after. And he was from the Duwamish tribe, and the architects and the designers, they wanted to bring in totem poles. It's like, well, the Duwamish don't make totem poles. So I'm not gonna make a totem pole. You know, I'm gonna create something that has the feel of maybe a totem pole, but it's not gonna be a totem pole. So I created these 6 sculptures made out of steel that are called sentinels, and they stand in front of this auditorium at the high school. But I said, like, no, I'm not going to lose my integrity, artistic or otherwise, because it's easy to do because you're like, oh yeah, I really want to do this project, so I will shape whatever it is that I do to please them, and I just really don't want to do that. And I'm very fortunate that I have been able to do that.
I applaud you. It's amazing. What did public art teach you about your studio practice that you might not have anticipated?
How much I love being alone. And also, no, I do love spending time by myself. I like that solitude. I like just being in my studio. My studio is my happy place, so like going in there and just making stuff or not making stuff or just doodling and like, you know, what some people might think of wasting time. To me, it's not. That's a necessary thing for me. And also just making the luxury of making something strictly for yourself. That is fantastic to me. Like, you know, and I have to say that every single piece in here I made because I wanted to make it, and not because something was telling me that I should do this or whatever. So while public art is a great exercise and a great challenge, and I like the idea that that is there for everyone to see, being in my studios, you can't top that.
Very lucky. So you're sort of a Renaissance artist. You have all these different things you're doing, your studio practice, your public art, but you're also deeply involved in arts advocacy and mentorship. So how does that sort of shape your understanding of what art means to community?
Well, you know, like I said, I didn't set out to become an artist, and the reason why I am at the place where I am at this point is because other people helped me. You know, other people saw whatever it was that they saw in what I did and encouraged me and said, like, oh, maybe you should do this and, you know, try this out. And I felt like, why not kind of not pay back because I'm not, you know, it's not the same people, but why not do something to try to help or encourage other people to do artwork? And I feel like I'm always encouraging people to do artwork whether they're good at it or not, because I think it's just a good brain exercise. But yeah, I just felt that, you know, as we know here, art is like the first thing people want to get rid of when, you know, when there's any kind of crisis. And I think like, we need art. You know, imagine a world with zero creativity. I don't want to live in that world. So I want to do it as much as possible to make sure that creativity, you know, continues. And you know, I don't think people realize that everything they do throughout the day, at some point, at several points throughout the day, is touched by art. Whether it's music, design, visual art, you know, it's like, even like, you know, planning this art right here, you know, but people don't think about it, so immediately when there's any kind of, you know, financial or whatever crisis, made up or not, it's like, we're gonna get rid of the arts because we don't need that. It's like, no, actually, you really do need it. You need it more than you think you need it. So I think that part felt very real to me, and I felt like I need to make sure that people know how important it is. And it's also a great experience to, like, I was involved with the Seattle Arts Commission, and I was on the Public Art Advisory Committee, because I felt like I've had the opportunity to make these public art pieces. And so I want to be in a place where I can help guide the process and also help artists get the process done and have it done right. And, you know, I felt like that, like, little professionalism is important for artists to learn, because I mean, I learned kind of the hard way, but you know, why not give somebody a little bit of good advice?
Well, I mean, that's an important question because with all the emerging artists, young artists in the world, do you have any sort of advice to give them to sort of stay true to their voice and stick to their guns like you did?
Yeah, I mean, what you just I mean, that's really, no, you have to stay true to your voice. Although I have to say that I've had some interesting experiences with not necessarily just younger, but maybe less experienced artists, where they, I mean, I had a conversation with a young artist. This guy was young, and I was living in Seattle, and he wanted to come to my studio to pick my brain. Actually, I do workshops for that, but it's okay. Yeah, I really like what you're doing. Come over, sit on the couch, and we'll talk. And so, we had a great conversation. And one of the things that I said is like, okay, so you're 20. You're not making your best work right now because you're 20. And if you're making your best work right now, just quit. Because, if it's not going to get any better, there's no point in continuing. So you're making great work, but think about how much more experience you can have in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15. And because he was asking me about all kinds of things, including pricing. I said, price your work at the beginning that it almost hurts a little bit that you're selling it for that low, because the last thing you want to do is start out really high and then have to come down. The next thing I see, he's in a show, and he's, has a painting like this size, and it was $10,000. And I'm like, dude. And so the next time, it was less. It was like $5,000. So it's like, okay, so you're doing exactly what I suggested not to do. And so for younger or less experienced artists, I'm not saying that you should do everything everybody tells you, but listen. Just listen to some people that maybe have a little bit more experience, that have been around the block a few times, that have learned from their own mistakes, as I have. And so those kind of things I would say, and don't make things because you think they're going to sell, because they won't.
So you're super accomplished. You've won major awards, fellowships, residencies. Is there any specific thing in your career that's been a highlight?
I feel like I've had a lot of really good things happen. I think probably the biggest honor happened in I think it was 1995 or 1986, something like that. I don't know if you know who Jacob Lawrence is, but he was an amazing artist, and he happened to be a professor at the University of Washington, and he used to show in the same gallery where I did it in Seattle. And without me knowing, I worshipped him and his work, and his wife was a fantastic artist as well. And Art News magazine asked him, they asked several very well-known artists throughout the country who they would say to watch. And he chose my work. It's there, it's on paper, and did you really say that? I was yeah, he did. So that meant so much to me, because it was someone that I really admired. I mean, he's in every museum in the country, and so that probably would have meant more than any fellowship or award or anything else like that.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I hope you framed it.
I have several copies.
Well, I know our audience is eager to get a few more questions in to you before we wrap up, but I'm just curious if there's one sort of feeling you hope the viewers walk away with after viewing Earthly Cliffs. What would it be?
I hope you're uplifted by it. I hope it creates just a good vibe, you know, just to feel good. And I hope that it makes you think about something. I hope that it makes you like think about, you know, what the shapes are, or you know what the colors mean to you, or how they make you feel. You know, but it's more about like that interaction, like looking at something and getting some sort of reaction out of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Juan. I think we'll open it up for some questions.
One of my first thoughts is that these, the molding paste, is that could also be plexiglass. And did you ever experiment with that?
Only when I worked in a frame shop, and like I made plexiglass frames, but yeah, it's very.
It's not as malleable.
It's not, yeah, and then like the cutting and like to be able to cut those shapes, I mean, you could do that if you had like a laser cutter and a computer, like, I mean, you would need a room like about this big.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was just a thought. And then secondly, I wanted to say that this is very Calder-esque in its shapes. And that, have you ever done mobiles?
No, in fact, I've been asked to, and I said no. Not that I don't, I mean, I just saw a show of his work and I loved it. It was just not, it's like, it didn't come naturally in my head.
And finally, your colors to me are very Miami, Cuba. It's Brazil. I mean, the colors, whatever they're telling you, is coming from, to me, your background.
Yeah,
It's really great too. I mean, I love that color. All those colors, they're just gorgeous. That's what I identified with without hearing your backstory. So it's very beautiful. They're beautiful.
Thank you. So there's nothing like the color of the Caribbean Ocean.
Yes.
And so
The
that,
Indian Ocean.
yeah, haven't been. So that obviously has inspired me. I also wanted to say something about, like you mentioned, the plexiglass. The thing about plexiglass, it doesn't have the little indentations and the little mistakes and the little mistakes. You know,
Right.
happy accidents. Yeah.
Yes, the happy accidents, yes.
Signs are right behind you.
Yeah, okay.
So sort of like what you challenged the 20-year-old artist. So where do you want to be in 5, 10 years? Or what kind of art do you want to be producing? What's on your bucket list in art?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just gonna keep being inspired. I mean, I have a lot of ideas and things that I want to do, but it's all about continuing making art. Like, and it's not so much about what it is I'm going to make. It's more about the idea of continuing to make art. Like, I can't imagine like not making art. Each time I create a body of work, it inspires me to do something further. So it's like the more I work in a series, like, okay, oh, I just got this idea to do this from this gesture that I made on the border on the paper. So one thing always leads to the next. So the idea that I would know what I'm going to be doing, but I have no clue. And honestly, I kind of like it that way because it's kind of exciting to not know what I'm going to be making.
Are there any mediums that you haven't ever tried that you'd really like to try?
You know, I fantasized about clay, but then there's a clay place right behind my studio, and I thought, oh, I should go take some lessons. And I thought, I really like being in my studio. So it's like, yeah, I would like to learn how to do that, but when it's my spare time, because I don't really have much. So I would like to, like, one of the things that I do want to do for sure is like create large sculptures out of like things like the 3 black and white pieces behind you. I want to have something like that fabricated, but, like 6 feet tall.
You would be a monkhead.
Yeah. So I'm kind of talking to the gallery that represents my work in Seattle about possibly helping to fund the fabrication. So.
Any other questions?
Twofold. I'm curious about the durability of the pieces. What actually, these obviously would not go outside as an exterior application. But how do you actually seal the cardboard as a base layer so that you don't have any
There's no cardboard.
It's all gone after
Yeah, these
that
are,
you pull all that off?
so yeah, the cardboard is pulled off. The two that I have in my studio are all cardboard. And I gessoed them, I glued them, I painted them, and I varnished them twice. Nothing's gonna happen to them, but they still probably would not be considered archival by a museum. So, I mean, they're gonna last longer than any of us, but,
Interesting.
yeah.
So the second part of that was, you talked a lot about, spent a lot of environment sort of things going on there. And architecture. And I'm kind of interested in, do you think about environment when you're working in your medium? In other words, toxicity, is this a medium that you can continue to work with without harm to the environment?
I do, and I don't use any toxic materials. It's all acrylic. Now, eventually, a lot of things are going to end up in landfills, or that is an issue that
We all deal with it.
we all have to deal with our own footprint.
But was that a consideration for you when you chose this method of actually building your work?
Only that I didn't want to use anything that I get a headache just like this from anything. Like somebody looks at me wrong and I get a headache. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't using anything that was toxic, that would bother like my studio neighbors or anything like that. I did want to say something, we sort of touched on it, but we didn't really go to. So one of the things that this body of work is about, and we talked about like the whole strata, is like if you I imagined what I would see if I was at one of those big sites and there was some sort of core sample that was pulled from way down where you can't even get to anyway. And somebody pulled that out and you took a microscope and you just studied this little teeny bit of it. What would those shapes look like? And that sort of informed what shapes I was going to use. And then the colors were about, when we look at like ancient Roman and Greek sculptures at ruins and things like that, we always see them as like these white marble things. But when they were first made, they were colored. Yeah, they were painted in different colors. And so what I wanted to do is like, okay, not this, if you dig something to the ground, you're gonna find like a lot of like gray, brown, not very distinctive colors. But what did they look like when they were not part of the strata? When it was a branch of a tree, or it was a flower, or it was a seed, or it was a pod, or it was the bones of an animal, or the scales of some animal or a feather or something like that. So I was trying to think of what would these things look like before they were kind of pushed down to create these the strata.
All right, well, thank you so much, Juan. It's been a pleasure.